Payne. Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro, posthumously, Specialist 5 Birdwell, Specialist 5 Fujii, Major Retired Duffy, Colonel Retired Puckett Jr., and Sergeant Major Payne were presented our nation's highest and most prestigious award for valor by the President of the United States, the Medal of Honor. This morning, they will formally be inducted into the Pentagon's most sacred place, the Hall of Heroes. Our official party for today's ceremony includes the Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Lloyd J. Austin, the Secretary of the Army, the Honorable Christine E. Wormuth, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark A. Milley, and the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General Joseph M. Martin. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the singing of our national anthem by Sergeant First Class Brendan Curran and the invocation delivered by Chaplain Major General Thomas Soljam.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me as we mark this very special ceremony in a word of prayer. O Lord, our strong tower, defender, and ever-present help in time of struggle, you are the God above all the earth who trains our hands for war and whose presence goes with us in the day of battle. We gather this day to honor 6 warriors who exemplified humble acts of courage, soldiers who in the crucible of conflict committed acts of extraordinary bravery and courage, no matter what the personal cost. With a profound sense of pride, we pay tribute to the valor of such warriors who gave so much of themselves in a moment in time, and one who gave the full measure in this Medal of Honor Hall of Heroes induction ceremony. They by far represent the best of who we are as a nation. Today we add Staff Sergeant Edward Kaneshiro, Specialist Dwight Birdwell, Specialist Dennis Fujii, Major Retired John Duffy, Colonel Retired Ralph Puckett Jr., and Sergeant Major Thomas Payne to our nation's conclave of true American heroes for their boldness, sacrifice, and bravery. They understood the hazards of their chosen profession, yet upheld it with honor, integrity, and selfless service. Each of these men, when faced with danger and overwhelming odds in the throes of combat, drew from your almighty strength of heart, soul, and spirit, and made courageous decisions built on the foundation of their love and devotion to their fellow soldiers, their leaders, the mission, the Army, and their nation. We thank the families who have faithfully stood alongside their soldier, those who carry the memory of their loved one, friends and teammates who are here today, and others in spirit to honor these great American soldiers and heroes. Bless our nation, the Department of Defense, the United States Army, with women and men of character, courage, and commitment like these. May the beacon of liberty continue to burn bright for our nation and freedom-loving people around the world. I holy, majestic, and mighty name, amen.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army.
Well, good morning, everybody. To the Kaneshiro family, Judge Birdwell and family, Mr. Fujii and family, Major Duffy and family, Lieutenant Colonel retired Mrs. Locke, and Sergeant Major Payne and family, thank you all for being here today. Thank you also to the Medal of Honor recipient, Mr. James McLaughlin, and Gold Star family member, Miss Jane Horton, who have joined us today. Secretary Austin, Secretary Wormuth, it's an honor to share the podium with you today. Senator Ernst, General Milley, General Shinseki, General McCaffrey, and all other distinguished attendees, welcome to today's induction ceremony. We're here today to recognize 6 incredible American soldiers for acts of heroism, but first, I want to take a moment to set the scene. It's almost impossible to describe the brutality of battle. It is chaotic, confusing, exhausting, and unrestrained. In these particular battles, the enemy was close and overwhelming. Death was imminent. Yet, these 6 men took action. They invigorated the fight against overwhelming violence and provided clarity to their comrades in moments of utter chaos. You will hear more details about the actions from the other speakers, but what I'd like to do is highlight a couple of witness perspectives that stood out to me as I reviewed these packets. In the Kim Son Valley, soldiers from Troop C, 1st to the 9th Cavalry, were ambushed by the enemy from a camouflage trench. They were pinned down by machine gun fire, unable to fall back and evacuate the wounded. They watched incredulously as Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro, alone and unstoppable, jumped into the trench, cleared it with a rifle and 6 hand grenades. They said they could see his head bobbing along, at times just 10 meters away, popping out to shout, "Grenade," before he threw his rounds. His one-man assault ended their destruction. At an air base outside of Saigon, a sergeant who had been blown out of his track by an RPG and was immobilized in a nearby ditch watched as the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army soldiers advanced towards him. But every time they did, as they approached, they were thwarted by Specialist 5 Birdwell, who was laying down devastating fires from his tank's guns. Sergeant Smith described Birdwell sitting exposed and fearlessly in the tank's hatch, surrounded by a cloud of paint chips from the enemy's rounds hitting around him. Specialist Birdwell's actions saved many lives, including Sergeant Smith's. In the mountains of Laos, forward air controllers were supporting a Vietnamese Ranger group that was nearly overrun. They took direction from the lone American on the ground, a medevac crew chief, Specialist 5 Fujii, who crash-landed and repeatedly waved off evacuation due to the onslaught of enemy fires. Specialist 5 Fujii had been under continuous fire for days and had lost a lot of blood, but seemed inexhaustible to the men on the radio. He continuously exposed himself to fires to pinpoint enemy locations, and he remained steady and composed as he relayed highly accurate targeting information. And when American crews arrived on station to evacuate the remainder of the Vietnamese battalion, Major Duffy was advising they were amazed. It seemed unfathomable that some 40 men with no food, water, or ammunition could still be alive amidst a swarm of enemy fighters. It was Major Duffy's many heroic acts, including calling for strikes on his own position to allow his battalion to retreat, that enabled the escape. Major Duffy's Vietnamese brothers, including Lieutenant Colonel Lee, who is here with us today, credit him with saving their battalion from complete annihilation. According to Colonel Lee, he appeared to be fearless. Many years before, in the biting cold near the Chongchun River in Korea, then Lieutenant Puckett jumped off his tank, which was halted by enemy fire, as he shouted, "Let's go, Rangers," as he led his company on foot towards Hill 205. When one of the many platoons were suppressed by machine gun fire, Colonel Puckett ran into the open to draw fire and allow his Rangers to locate the gunner. 2 times he ran across the field and, still in good humor, shouted, "Okay, I'm only going to do this one more time." Corporal Pollock described him as the bravest man he ever saw. Then, decades later, in northern Iraq, Sergeant Major Payne and his team entered a building that was burning to rescue hostages from an ISIS compound. The smoke was thick and the air was suppressively hot. Sergeant Major Payne called for a bolt cutter and exposed himself to enemy fire as he cut the locks and freed the hostages. The call came that the building was collapsing, but Sergeant Major Payne stayed to assist the fleeing people. As he finally exited the building, his teammates heard him shout, "Last man!" He was helping the final hostage, who had been immobilized by despair, find his way to freedom. Beacons of hope in a storm of despair. It's almost inconceivable to imagine how any person could act the way these men did. So what drove them? The answer in these stories tells us these men exhibited unbelievable courage, strength of will, and selflessness out of love for their fellow man. What a testament to human potential. These soldiers now have a venerated place in American lore and forever will represent the greatness of our country and those who serve it. They will inspire generations of service members who are looking for clarity as they face their own battles. And these stories will be a shining example of what the band of brothers and sisters can compel young people to believe or be. Today, we use the phrase Army Strong. These men epitomize that phrase. In the face of terror, they were pillars of strength, endurance, of love. That is Army Strong. Their stories will always be a reminder of the potential strength of the American soldier. So next time you hear someone say Army Strong, I'd ask you to think of them. Thank you, gentlemen, and your families for your service and unbelievable sacrifice to your country. Army Strong.
Thank you, General Martin. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of the Army.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our distinguished guests, to our Medal of Honor recipients, to their families and their friends. It's wonderful to have you with us this morning. Secretary Austin, General Milley, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you all of our distinguished guests who are too numerous to name. Today we honor 6 Medal of Honor recipients: Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro, Specialist 5 Birdwell, Major Retired Duffy, Colonel Puckett, Specialist 5 Fujii, each of whom fought either in Vietnam, in Korea, and Sergeant Major Payne, who fought in Iraq. We honor these men as soldiers of the world's greatest land fighting force who went above and beyond the call of duty. We honor their families, we honor their heroism and sacrifice, and we honor each individuals as beloved sons, husbands, fathers, and grandfathers. Our country calls upon soldiers of the United States Army to fight and win our nation's wars. Our soldiers go willingly, with courage and honor, to defend our country, our democracy, and our national interests. The 6 individuals that we're inducting into the Hall of Heroes today did just that and so much more. In the moments that mattered most, these men made the choice time and time again to step forward. They reached deep into their personal reserves of faith, values, and training, and in the most dangerous situations, they mustered the strength to prevail. Duty and devotion to their fellow soldiers in arms animated their selflessness and enabled their uncommon heroism. Despite their brave achievements, some of our soldiers did not receive the hero's welcome they deserved when they returned home. As I'm sure some in the audience can remember, when our soldiers returned from Vietnam, our country was in considerable turmoil. Our veterans often bore the brunt of that political and social unrest, a burden that really was not theirs to bear. And for many veterans and heroes of the Vietnam War, including Specialist 5 Birdwell, the war went into a box that he would never open again. So I'm especially honored this morning to tell you a little something about each of our recipients and our heroes. The first honoree I'd like to introduce you to is Staff Sergeant Edward Noboru Kaneshiro, who received our nation's highest honor for valor posthumously. He is represented here today by his children, Naomi, Tom, and retired Master Sergeant John Kaneshiro. Was born Takame and Tama Kaneshiro in Honolulu, Hawaii. The 8th of 16 siblings, he graduated from Leilihua High School, the home of the Mighty Mules in central Oahu, and he worked on the family farm until he joined the Army in 1959. He was husband to Mitsuko and dad to Naomi, Tom, and John, and in July 1966, he deployed to fight America's war in Vietnam, when his oldest child was 10 and his youngest was just 4 months old. In Vietnam, Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro was a squad leader with Troop C, 1st Squadron, 9th Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division. He was part of the Blues Unit, a unit that took the fight to the enemy. When foes were drawn out of their hiding spot, the Blues were called to go in and look for the fight. After repeated acts of extraordinary courage, he was killed ultimately by enemy gunfire in March of 1967. In the years that followed, Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro's son John, who is here today, carried on his father's proud legacy of service to the nation, joining the Army as an NCO, and he retired as a Master Sergeant. I'm told that it was the shared experience of wearing the uniform of our nation that helped bring John closer to the man who was his father, a man who he did not get the opportunity to know. Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro, the son of Japanese immigrants, was 13 years old when America was attacked at Pearl Harbor. We can all only imagine what it must have been like for him and his family during that time, and yet he chose to serve our country and go to war on its behalf more than 20 years later. Yesterday, he became the 14th Japanese-American recipient of the Medal of Honor from the great state of Hawaii, and his is a story that is only possible here in the United States of America. Our second Vietnam War hero is Specialist 5 Dwight D. Birdwell, a proud son of the Cherokee Nation. Mr. Birdwell is a published author, a former Chief Justice of the Cherokee Nation Supreme Court, and the 33rd Native American to receive the Medal of Honor. He met his wife, Virginia, also from a Cherokee family, when they were still children. While they had known each other for years, it was only after he returned from Vietnam that they fell in love. Mr. Birdwell is father to Edward and Stephanie, father-in-law to Spike Bighorn of Montana, and pa to his twin granddaughters, Willow and Raven, who are with us today. Mr. Birdwell graduated from Stillwell High School, and in 1966, at the age of 18, he enlisted in the regular Army as a private. His first overseas assignment was to Korea, where he served in the 2nd Infantry Division. Specialist 5 Birdwell then went on to serve in Vietnam as a gunner with Troop C, 3rd Squadron, 4th Cavalry Regiment, 25th Infantry Division. Specialist Birdwell lived by the Cherokee Creed, "Don't bring shame on your ancestors." And on that fateful day, January 31st, 1968, those words steadied and sustained him. When Mr. Birdwell returned from Vietnam, he received his bachelor's degree from Northeastern State University. With the encouragement of Cherokee Nation elders, he pursued his Juris Doctorate from the University of Oklahoma. Many of the soldiers who fought with him in Vietnam faced hostility at home for their service and struggled with PTSD, alcoholism, and myriad other health issues. In one of his classes at Northeastern State, a professor asked those who fought in Vietnam to raise their hands. Although he knew some would scorn him, he raised his hand. He was proud to have served. And Mr. Birdwell, we are so proud and thankful for your service. Specialist 5, Dennis M. Fujii, is another proud son of Hawaii. He was born on the island of Kauai and attended Waimea High School. His mother's family were rice farmers, and his stepfather was a mechanic for the Hawaii National Guard. Mr. Fujii is husband to Ray, father to Tiffany, and has a 9-month-old grandson. He is an avid fisherman and the 15th Japanese American to receive the nation's highest honor for valor. In 1967, by the time Specialist 5 Fujii enlisted in the Army as a private, the Vietnam War was already well underway, and that is where he wanted to be. Specialist Fujii deployed to Vietnam in 1968, where he spent his first 9 months assigned to Company C, 2nd Battalion, 35th Infantry Regiment, 4th Infantry Division as an assistant machine gunner. His second tour to Vietnam, 2 years later, was with the 237th Medical Detachment, 61st Medical Battalion, 37th Medical Group. Reflecting on his time in the Army and his service in Vietnam, Specialist Fujii expressed that he was driven by a desire to do his fair share. While he was deployed, friends and family back home asked him, "Why are you there? What are you fighting for?" Specialist Fujii told them that he felt called to do for his country what it needed, to defend democracy against communism and to preserve a better life for the people of Vietnam. Thank you, Mr. Fujii, for doing immeasurably more than your fair share. Our 4th Vietnam War hero is Major Retired John J. Duffy. Major Duffy is dad to Natalie and John, and Baba to Marcus and Judd. In addition to being one of the most decorated Army veterans of his generation, he is also a poet, a Pulitzer Prize nominee, a publisher, and the founder of an investment firm. In 1955, at the age of 17, he aspired to be a paratrooper, and he enlisted in the Army as a private. When asked what set him on that particular path, he recalled that his neighbor was a U.S. Army paratrooper and had very shiny boots. These boots made quite an impression on the young John Duffy, who decided that he too would become a paratrooper. So at 17 and a half, Major Duffy was not only a fully qualified paratrooper, but he now had his own pair of boots, a pair that he kept shined to perfection. Major Duffy prided himself on training hard. As he told me yesterday, he attended 17 military schools and received specialized training in things like forward air control, which came in very handy during his 4 tours in Vietnam. At multiple points in his life of triumphs and tribulations, he asked himself, what should I do next? What is the thing I should be doing? This question led Major Duffy to become a commissioned officer and then to be stationed at Fort Bragg, serving with the Special Forces. The war in Vietnam was just beginning, and this time for John Duffy, the next thing to do was to volunteer to serve in Vietnam. So in December of 1972, as an advisor to elite South Vietnamese paratroopers, his job was to call in enemy positions to American air power. As the only American on the ground, he worked hand in hand with his South Vietnamese counterpart, Lieutenant Colonel Mei Lee, who is also with us here today. Despite the repeated attacks and the wounds he suffered, Major Duffy persisted. When Lieutenant Colonel Lee was seriously injured, Duffy led the remaining defenders on Charlie Hill to safety, and his partnership with Lieutenant Colonel Lee on the battlefield turned into a lifelong friendship. After retiring from the Army, John Duffy became a legend in the Special Operations community. He is a founding member of the Special Operations Association and a life member of the Special Forces Decade Association, the Legion of Valor, and many more. The fifth hero that we're honoring today is Colonel retired Ralph Puckett, Jr. Colonel Puckett was awarded the Medal of Honor in April 2021, and I'm delighted that we're officially able to indict him into the Hall of Heroes this morning. Colonel Puckett is a proud son of Georgia, the son of Atticus Puckett, husband to Jean, dad to Martha and Thomas, and known as Big Daddy to his 6 grandchildren. He attended the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and received his commission as an infantry officer in 1949. Colonel Puckett formed and commanded one of the first Ranger units after the Rangers were disbanded following World War II, and he is considered to be the architect of the modern-day Ranger Regiment. As a Ranger instructor at Fort Benning, Colonel Puckett was known to say, "Don't quit, Ranger," at the turnaround of the 12-mile foot march, and many soldiers today still recall his encouraging presence with fondness. He believed then, as he does now, that if a soldier was willing and able to meet the standards that were set, they had the right to be there. And being there was important for Ralph Puckett in November 1950, first on Hill 222 and later on Hill 205 in Korea, where against all odds, his leadership and example helped to save his men. To Colonel, thank you for your courage, for your lifetime of service, and for defining what it means to be a Ranger for successive generations who followed you. Our final inductee this morning in the Hall of Heroes is Sergeant Major Thomas Patrick Payne. Sergeant Major Payne answered the call to serve after 9/11, enlisting as a private in 2002. He keeps his Bible in his pack and wears a cross necklace close to his chest. He's a proud son of South Carolina, dad to Elizabeth, Aaron, and Joshua, and husband to Allison. He and his wife Allison met at Lake Murray, South Carolina, where he was recovering from a grenade blast from Afghanistan. They met, they fell in love, and the rest is history, as they say. Pat and Allison named their second son Josh after Master Sergeant Joshua Wheeler, who was killed in action during the hostage rescue operation in Norwegia. If you've had the opportunity to meet Sergeant Major Payne, you'll notice his no-nonsense humility and relentless focus on the mission. But it's worth knowing that he served in the Army's most elite units, including the 75th Ranger Regiment and within several other units in Army Special Operations Command. As he looks back on his life to date and military service, he will tell you that even if you laid out 100 careers in front of him, he would pick this career every time. Reflecting on the Medal of Honor that he was awarded in 2020, Sergeant Major Payne is quick to note that he should not be remembered as a recipient, but as a guardian. Shortly after the hostage rescue operation in Norwegia in 2015, I had the opportunity to visit with members of the unit that participated in that operation in Kirkuk province. I remember worrying that day that I did not know what to say to the soldiers I would meet, who had just lost their brother in arms, Master Sergeant Wheeler. I still do not have the right words to say today, but what I can say is thank you for your extraordinary courage and valor, and thank you for the many lives you saved. On behalf of a grateful nation and a grateful Army, thanks to all of our Hall of Hero inductees for your extraordinary courage and valor, and for the many lives you saved. Thank you for your love of country and all that you have given to it. To your families, thank you for your sacrifice and for sharing your sons, husbands, fathers, and grandfathers with all of us.
Thank you, Secretary Wormuth. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of Defense.
Well, good morning, everybody. Secretary Wormuth and General Martin, thank you for your moving tributes to our honorees. And thank you for everything that you do for our soldiers and their families. It's also great to be here with General Milley. Thank you for your partnership and your leadership, Chairman. Special welcome to Senator Ernst for joining us today. Thank you for being here to help us recognize some great American heroes. And let me of the recipients who are here today and those who are joining us online. The families of our service members might never wear the uniform, but they serve every bit as much as their loved ones. And we know how hard it can be, and we can never take it for granted. So from all of us here, thank you for everything that you do. Now, it's an honor to spend time with one Medal of Honor recipient. But being here today with today's gathering of heroes, this is once in a lifetime. The Medal of Honor is reserved only for those whose bravery shone out during the chaos and the din of battle. For those who put their lives on the line for their teammates. And for those who charged towards danger and went far, far above and beyond the call of duty. And today, as you've heard, we have the enormous privilege of adding 6 Medal of Honor recipients to our Hall of Heroes. Now, these warriors come from different backgrounds. Their hometowns stretch from New York to Honolulu. They fought in conflicts from Korea to Vietnam to the war against ISIS. And their time in uniform spans nearly 80 years. But they are all soldiers, united in their devotion to duty. Duty to carry out their mission. Teammates and the allies who served alongside. And duty to democracy and to the country that they love. And that sense of duty carried them through incredible acts of courage. You know, none of them set out to be here today. But in these moments, they displayed the rare kind of valor deserving of our military's highest decoration. So let me start with Staff Sergeant Edward Kaneshiro. In 1966, he was serving in Vietnam as an infantry squad leader. And one day in December, he and his squad were out scouting for open terrain. Now, they didn't know it, but North Vietnamese forces were planning to ambush their teammates through a concealed trench system. And when machine gun fire erupted, his squad moved towards the sound. And Sergeant Kaneshiro threw a grenade right through the aperture of the enemy bunker, stopping the ambush where it started. And then he jumped into the trenches and single-handedly destroyed one enemy group after another. And because of his bravery, his platoon was able to withdraw from the village. And tragically, just a few months later, Sergeant Kaneshiro was killed in action by enemy fire. I wish that I could personally thank him for his heroism and his selflessness. but it's a profound honor to have his children with us today. And as I told you, I know that you didn't get enough time with your father, and I know that no words of praise can make up for his loss. But I can only imagine how proud you must be of his service. And John, I know how proud your father would be of your own military career, including your 2 deployments to Operation Iraqi Freedom. You have all carried on his legacy and lived lives that honor his memory. Now, like Sergeant Kaneshiro, Specialist 5 Dwight Birdwell also jumped into action when his unit came under attack. In 1968, during the Tet Offensive, his team was called to protect an Allied base near Saigon, and they were heavily outnumbered. And almost immediately, his tank commander was critically wounded. And Specialist Birdwell realized that the tank was the only thing between his fellow soldiers and the enemy. So Specialist Birdwell fired his hands on the tank's main 90-millimeter gun and then its machine gun. And at several points, he hopped out of the commander's hatch with his M16 to get a better shot. Even when he ran out of ammo, he kept on fighting. He made his way down to a downed American helicopter and found 2 machine guns. His comrade took one, and Specialist Birdwell took the other. Now, that gun was shot out of his hands, and Specialist Birdwell was wounded by the shrapnel. But he still refused to leave the battle. And Specialist Birdwell ran through a storm of enemy fire and found a defensive position to collect and redistribute ammunition to the remaining defenders. And then he led a group of his comrades past enemy lines and threw hand grenades to prevent the enemy from advancing. And through it all, Specialist Birdwell continued to fight. And when he returned home to Oklahoma, he continued to serve. He earned his law degree and went on to preside over the Cherokee Nation's Judicial Appeals Tribunal as its Chief Justice. Specialist Birdwell, you said that you joined the Army because you'd been inspired by the many members of the Cherokee Nation who served before you. I hope that you know that your service will inspire generations to come. Next is Specialist 5 Dennis Fujii. And on the 24th of February, 1971, the New York Times reported from South Vietnam on his bravery, saying that, quote, pilots here thought that the man was a hero. Days earlier, Specialist Fujii's dust-off crew had taken off in a helicopter to evacuate South Vietnamese military personnel from a raging battlefield. But as they approached, they took intense fire, and their Huey crash-landed. And Specialist Fujii was injured in the wreckage. Another American helicopter was able to land nearby, and his crewmates climbed aboard. But Specialist Fujii was taking too much fire. So he signaled to the pilot to take off without him so that the others could get to safety. And once the helicopter flew away, he was the only American left on the battlefield. He managed to find a radio and told aviators not to try to come rescue him. There was just too much anti-aircraft fire, he told them, and the battlefield was too hot. He was hurt and stranded. But he spent the night and the next day administering first aid to wounded South Vietnamese allies. In the meanwhile, the enemy brought reinforcements. And soon the encampment was under renewed assault, and Specialist Fujii found yet another radio. But he didn't use it to request a rescue. Instead, he called in enemy positions and directed airstrikes against them for the next 17 hours. And finally, a helicopter airlifted him out. But again, they sustained enemy fire and crash landed 2.5 miles away. And so exhausted and wounded, he had to wait another 2 days before reaching safety. And Specialist Fujii, people have known you to be a hero ever since. And I'm proud to officially add your name to our Hall of Heroes. Now, in 1972, Major Duffy was a senior advisor to an elite battalion of the South Vietnamese Army. He trusted his counterparts, and they trusted him. And on 14 April, their job was simple, but gravely dangerous. They had to hold off North Vietnamese forces at Fire Support Base Charlie for as long as possible. So in the early morning hours, Major Duffy snuck up as close as he could to the enemy's anti-aircraft positions. And from there, he called in airstrikes. Major Duffy was wounded by shrapnel, but he refused evacuation. And when the enemy began bombarding the base with artillery, he put himself in an exposed position so that he could call in more airstrikes. And finally, the enemy went silent. Without a moment to lose, Major Duffy moved Allied soldiers to safer positions. And because it was too dangerous for resupply aircraft to land, he redistributed what remained of the ammo. And by the next morning, the North Vietnamese forces resumed their attacks, inflicting even more casualties. Major Duffy organized an evacuation of those who survived. And when they reached the exfiltration site, Major Duffy would not leave until all of his brothers in arms were aboard. And one of those evacuees is here with us today, Major Duffy's counterpart, Lieutenant Colonel Lee. Gentlemen, thank you both for your service. You know, years later, Major Duffy remembered being asked if he wanted to go into that battle. And he replied, quote, "Gotta go in, it's the job." Major Duffy, it is the job. But few have ever done that job with as much valor. So thank you for all that you have done on behalf of our country. And today, after delays caused by the pandemic, I'm also glad to officially induct 2 Medal of Honor recipients into the Hall of Heroes. Colonel Ralph Puckett. Although Colonel Puckett couldn't be with us in person today, I believe that he's watching from home. So good morning, Colonel. And we're glad that you're represented here in person by retired Lieutenant Colonel John Locke. So let's think back on a frigid morning in 1950 during the Battle for Hill 205 in the Korean War. First Lieutenant Puckett was commanding the 8th U.S. Army Ranger Company. And he repeatedly put his life at risk running across an open field and courting enemy fire so that his team could spot the Chinese position. And as the battle ground on, he was injured by grenade fragments, but he wouldn't leave. Instead, he moved from foxhole to foxhole, redistributing ammunition and taking care of his men. His compassion and his grit inspired his fellow Rangers. And so when he was wounded again, he ordered his men to leave him behind. But they refused, and they got him out. Because Lieutenant Puckett had shown them that true courage means putting your people first. And after receiving the Medal of Honor last year, Colonel Puckett thought of his team, saying, quote, "The people who earned that medal are the Rangers who did more than I asked." That's absolutely right. But Colonel Puckett, you did so much more than your country asked, and we salute your tremendous service. And finally, from Colonel Puckett's heroism in 1950, we fast forward some 65 years and shift to Kirkuk province in northern Iraq and the battle against ISIS. In 2015, then Sergeant First Class Patrick Payne was charged with leading a raid to free Iraqis taken hostage by the jihadists. His team knew that ISIS had been holding the prisoners in 2 buildings. So when Sergeant Payne's team landed in the dead of night, they cleared one of those buildings and freed the hostages inside. But the second building was under intense fire, and Sergeant Payne heard on the radio that his fellow soldiers needed help there. And he remembers turning to one of his teammates and saying, quote, "Let's get into the fight." The building was burning, and Sergeant Payne knew that the prisoners locked inside would die if they weren't freed. So he plunged into the smoke and the enemy fire and found an armored door. Behind that armored door were dozens of prisoners trapped. Sergeant Payne then traded his rifle for bolt cutters and again went into the building. It was on fire and under fire. And he broke the lock on the door. Now, by this point, the building was near collapsing, and the soldiers were ordered to evacuate. But Sergeant Payne ran back in again to save more hostages. And then he went in again to check that no one was left behind. And Sergeant Payne had said, "Let's get into the fight." And he did, over and over again. And that night he helped to free 75 prisoners. And those men and women and their families will never forget that daring rescue, and neither will we. So thank you, Sergeant Payne. And I have to tell you, Sergeant Major Payne, I'm especially grateful because I'm the guy that sent you into that fight as a CENTCOM commander. And I will remain grateful to you and your comrades for the incredible, incredible work that you did on that night to save lives. So on behalf of our country, thank you for all that you and your teammates have done. Ladies and gentlemen, President Kennedy once said that a nation reveals itself not only by the men it produces, but also by the men it honors. So today we etch these soldiers' names into the Hall of Heroes to honor their deeds and to remember why American warriors fight. We honor these heroes because they represent the very best of us. And we honor these heroes to inspire future generations. May we all find the courage to live up to the example that they have set. May we all find the commitment to serve and defend our republic. And may we all find the dedication and duty to our democracy that these heroes have shown. May God bless our Medal of Honor recipients and those who serve alongside them and all who love them. Thank you very much.
Secretary Wormuth, General Milley, General Martin, Miss Naomi Villoria, and Miss Ashley Axon Strathead will now join Secretary Austin on stage for the induction ceremony of Staff Sergeant Edward N. Kaneshiro. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated during the presentations. The President of the United States of America, authorized by the Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has posthumously awarded, in the name of Congress, the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Edward N. Kaneshiro, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life aboard the call of duty. Staff Sergeant Edward N. Kaneshiro distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving as an infantry squad leader with Troop C, 1st Squadron, 9th Cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division, near Phu Hu 2, Kim Sung Valley, Republic of Vietnam, on 1 December 1966. Not knowing that the village was heavily fortified with a fully bunkered and concealed trench system and garrisoned by North Vietnamese troops in vastly superior force, 2 squads of the platoon had deployed to its center, while Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro and his squad scouted the more open terrain to the east of the village. Sensing the opportunity to ambush the infantry squads, the entrenched enemy force erupted with machine gun and small arms fire against the 2 squads at the center of the village, killing the platoon leader and the point man, wounding 4 others, then successfully suppressing the surviving soldiers. Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro moved with his men to the sound of the fire, swiftly reading the situation, seeing that the fire from the trench had to be stopped if anyone was to survive. He first deployed his men to cover, then crawled forward to attack the enemy force alone. He began by throwing grenades from the parapet while flattened to the ground, successfully throwing the first grenade through the aperture of the bunker, eliminating the machine gunner who had opened the action. With 5 grenades remaining and his rifle to sustain his assault, Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro jumped into the trench to sweep its length, where it fronted the 2 pinned squads. Over the distance of about 35 meters, he worked the ditch alone, destroying 1 enemy group with rifle fire and 2 others with grenades. By the end of his sweep, the able-bodied survivors of the 2 squads were again standing and preparing to move the dead and wounded. Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro's actions enabled the orderly extraction and reorganization of the platoon, ultimately led to successful withdrawal from the village. Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro's conspicuous gallantry and uncommon heroism under fire were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. At this time, the Medal of Honor flag will be presented. On 23 October 2002, Public Law 107-248, Section 8143, established the Medal of Honor flag to recognize service members who have distinguished themselves by gallantry in action above and beyond the call of duty. The Medal of Honor flag commemorates the sacrifice and blood shed for our freedoms and gives emphasis to the Medal of Honor being the highest award for valor by an individual serving in the armed forces of the United States. The light blue color, with gold fringe bearing 13 white stars, are adapted from the Medal of Honor ribbon. Thank you, Ms. Naomi Valoria and Ms. Axon Shelsted. Specialist 5, Dwight Birdwell, please join Secretary Austin, Secretary Wormuth, General Milley, and General Martin for the induction ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated during the presentation. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded, in the name of Congress, the Medal of Honor to Specialist 5, Dwight W. Birdwell, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Specialist 5, Dwight W. Birdwell, distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving with C Troop, 3rd Squadron, 4th Cavalry, 25th Infantry Division in the Republic of Vietnam on 31 January 1968. On this date, C Troop was ordered to move south to help repel an enemy attack on Tan Son Nhut Air Base. As the C Troop column of tanks and armored personnel carriers approached the west gate of Tan Son Nhut Air Base, it came under intense enemy fire from a building to its right. Unbeknown to C Troop, it had driven directly into an enemy force consisting of 3 battalions. The column tried to push through the initial attack, but the lead tank, crippled by a rocket-propelled grenade explosion, was blocking the way forward. C Troop immediately came under heavy enemy fire from both sides of the road. Specialist 5 Birdwell, upon seeing that his tank commander was wounded by enemy fire, immediately went to his aid. Under intense enemy fire, he lowered the injured tank commander to the ground and moved him to safety. Specialist 5 Birdwell then, with complete disregard for his own safety, mounted the tank and assumed the tank commander's position. Standing in the tank commander's hatch with the upper half of his body exposed to heavy enemy fire, Specialist 5 Birdwell used the tank's 50 caliber machine gun and 90 millimeter main gun to suppress the enemy attack. With the ammunition for the 90 millimeter main gun exhausted, he continued to fire the 50 caliber machine gun until it overheated. At this point, Specialist 5 Birdwell, rather than abandoning his position, continued to engage the enemy with his M16 rifle, sometimes exposing his entire body to enemy fire in order to engage the enemy from a better vantage point. when a United States helicopter crashed nearby, Specialist 5 Birdwell, under withering enemy fire, dismounted and moved to the helicopter, where he returned with 2 M60 machine guns and ammunition. After giving 1 M60 ammunition to a fellow soldier, he remounted his tank and used the other M60 to again engage the enemy. Specialist 5 Birdwell continued to engage the enemy with complete disregard for his own safety until the M60 he was firing was hit by enemy fire. Specialist 5 Birdwell, now wounded in the face, neck, chest, and arms, dismounted the tank but refused to be medically evacuated. Instead, Specialist 5 Birdwell, under enemy fire, rallied fellow soldiers to advance forward toward the front of the armored column, where they set up a defensive position by a large tree. From this position, he and the other soldiers engaged the enemy with M16 fire and grenades. As the enemy fire lessened, Specialist 5 Birdwell gathered ammunition from the disabled vehicles and helped wounded soldiers move to safer positions. His leadership and tenacity under fire inspired the other Sea Troop soldiers to continue fighting against the superior enemy force and directly contributed to the enemy's ultimate defeat. Specialist 5 Birdwell's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. At this time, the Medal of Honor flag will be presented by the Secretary of Defense. Thank you, Specialist 5 Birdwell. Specialist 5, Dennis M. Fujii. Please join Secretary Austin, Secretary Wormuth, General Milley, and General Martin for the induction ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated during the presentations. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Specialist 5 Dennis M. Fujii, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Specialist 5 Dennis M. Fujii distinguished himself by conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity beyond the call of duty while serving as crew chief aboard a helicopter ambulance during the rescue operation in Laos, Republic of Vietnam, during the period of 18 to 22 February 1971. Specialist 5 Fujii was serving with the 237th Medical Detachment, 61st Medical Battalion, 67th Medical Group. The team's mission was to evacuate seriously wounded Vietnamese military personnel from the midst of a raging battlefield. The aircraft's primary approach to the bullet-infested landing zone was thwarted by heavy volumes of enemy fire directed at the specialist's helicopter. As the pilot made a second landing attempt, the enemy concentrated a barrage of flak at the air ambulance, which damaged the craft and caused it to crash in the conflict area, injuring Specialist 5 Fujii. Moments later, another American helicopter successfully landed near the wreckage of the specialist's airship and extracted all the downed crewmen except for Specialist 5 Fujii, who was unable to board due to the intense enemy fire directed at him. Rather than further endanger the lives of his comrades aboard the second helicopter, Specialist 5 Fujii waved the craft out of the combat area and remained behind as the only American on the battlefield. Subsequent attempts to rescue the specialist were aborted due to the violent anti-aircraft fire. Specialist 5 Fujii finally secured a radio and informed the aviators in the area that the landing zone was too hot for further evacuation attempts. During the night and all through the next day, Specialist 5 Fujii disregarded his own wounds as he administered first aid to the Allied casualties. On the night of 19 February, the Allied perimeter came under ruthless assault by a reinforced enemy regiment supported by heavy artillery. Once again, obtaining a radio transmitter, Specialist Fujii called in American helicopter gunships to assist the small unit in repelling the attack. For a period of over 17 consecutive hours, Specialist 5 Fujii repeatedly exposed himself to hostile fire as he left the security of his entrenchment to better observe enemy troop positions and to direct airstrikes against them. At times, the fighting became so vicious that Specialist 5 Fujii was forced to interrupt radio transmittal in order to place a suppressive rifle fire on the enemy while at close quarters. Though wounded and severely fatigued by 20 February, the specialist bore the responsibility for the protection and defense of the friendly encampment until an American helicopter could land and attempt to airlift him from the area. As his air ambulance left the battlefield, it received numerous hits and was forced to crash land at another South Vietnamese ranger base, approximately 4 kilometers from the specialist's original location. The totally exhausted Specialist 5 Fujii remained at the Allied camp for 2 more days until another helicopter could return him to Phu for medical assistance on 22 February. Specialist 5 Fujii's extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. At this time, the Medal of Honor flag will be presented by the Secretary of Defense. Thank you, Specialist 5 Fujii. Major Retired John Duffy, please join Secretary Austin, Secretary Wormuth, General Milley, and General Martin for the induction ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated during the presentation. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded, in the name of Congress, the Medal of Honor to Major John J. Duffy, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Major John J. Duffy distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving as the senior advisor to the 11th Airborne Battalion, 2nd Brigade, Airborne Division, Army of the Republic of Vietnam in the Republic of Vietnam during the period of 14 to 15 April 1972. In the 2 days preceding the events of the 14th to 15th April 1972, the commander of the 11th Airborne Battalion was killed. The battalion command post was destroyed, and Major Duffy was twice wounded but refused to be evacuated. Then, on 14 April, Major Duffy directed the defense of Fire Support Base Charlie, which was surrounded by a battalion-sized enemy element. In the morning hours, after a failed effort to establish a landing zone for resupply aircraft, he moved close to enemy anti-aircraft positions to call in airstrikes. At this time, Major Duffy was again wounded by fragments from a recoilless rifle round and again refused medical evacuation. Shortly thereafter, the enemy began an artillery bombardment on the base, and he remained in exposed positions to direct gunships on the enemy positions, which eventually silenced the enemy fire. Following the bombardment, Major Duffy assessed the conditions on the base and personally ensured the wounded friendly foreign soldiers were moved to positions of relative safety, and the remaining ammunition was appropriately distributed among the remaining defenders. Shortly thereafter, the enemy resumed indirect fire on the base, expending estimated 300 rounds. Nevertheless, he remained in an exposed position to direct fire gunships on the enemy positions. In the late afternoon hours, the enemy began a ground assault from all sides of the firebase, and Major Duffy moved from position to adjust fire, spot targets for artillery observers, and ultimately to direct gunship fire on a friendly position which had been compromised. As the evening wore on, it became clear that the defenders could not withstand the overwhelming enemy forces, and he began to organize an evacuation of the firebase under the cover of night. With the goal of a complete withdrawal, Major Duffy was the last man off the base, remaining behind to adjust the covering fire from gunships until the last possible moment. When the acting battalion commander was wounded, he assumed command of the evacuation and maintained communication with the available air support to direct fire on the enemy. In the early morning hours of 15 April, the enemy ambushed the battalion, inflicting additional casualties and scattering some of the able-bodied soldiers. Major Duffy organized defensive positions during the ambush and ensured the friendly foreign forces could successfully repulse the enemy. After withstanding the ambush, he led the evacuees, many of whom were significantly wounded, to an established evacuation area, despite being continually pursued by the enemy. Upon reaching the exfiltration site, Major Duffy directed gunship fire on enemy positions and marked a landing zone for the helicopters. Only after ensuring all the evacuees were aboard did Major Duffy board while also assisting a wounded friendly foreign soldier in with him. Once on board, he administered aid to a helicopter door gunner who had been wounded during the evacuation. Major Duffy's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. At this time, the Medal of Honor flag will be presented by the Secretary of Defense. Thank you, Major Duffy. Mr. John Locke, the representative for Colonel Retired Ralph Puckett, please join Secretary Austin, Secretary Wormuth, General Milley, and General Martin for the induction ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated during the presentations. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to First Lieutenant Ralph Puckett, Jr., United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. First Lieutenant Ralph Puckett, Jr. distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving as the commander, 8th United States Army Ranger Company during the period of 25 November 1950 through 26 November 1950 in Korea. As his unit commenced a daylight attack on Hill 205, the enemy directed mortar, machine gun, and small arms fire against the advancing force. To obtain supporting fire, First Lieutenant Puckett mounted the closest tank, exposing himself to the deadly enemy fire. Leaping from the tank, he shouted words of encouragement to his men and began to lead the Rangers in the attack. Almost immediately, enemy fire threatened the success of the attack by pinning down one platoon. Leaving the safety of his position with full knowledge of the danger, First Lieutenant Puckett intentionally ran across an open area 3 times to draw enemy fire, thereby allowing the Rangers to locate and destroy the enemy positions and to seize Hill 205. During the night, the enemy launched a counterattack that lasted 4 hours. Over the course of the counterattack, the Rangers were inspired and motivated by the extraordinary leadership and courage example exhibited by First Lieutenant Puckett. As a result, 5 human wave attacks by battalion-sized strength enemy elements were repulsed. During the first attack, First Lieutenant Puckett was wounded by grenade fragmentation, but refused to evacuate and continually directed artillery support that decimated attacking enemy formations, repeatedly abandoning positions of relative safety to make his way from foxhole to check the company's perimeter and distribute ammunition amongst the Rangers. When the enemy launched a 6th attack, it became clear to First Lieutenant Puckett that the position was untenable due to the unavailability of support artillery fire. During this attack, 2 enemy mortar rounds landed in his foxhole, inflicting grievous wounds which limited his mobility. Knowing his men were in a precarious situation, First Lieutenant Puckett commanded the Rangers to leave him behind and evacuate the area. Feeling a sense of duty to aid him, the Rangers refused the order and staged an effort to retrieve him from the foxhole while still under fire from the enemy. Ultimately, the Rangers succeeded in retrieving First Lieutenant Puckett, and they moved to the bottom of the hill, where First Lieutenant Puckett called for devastating artillery fire on top of the enemy-controlled hill. First Lieutenant Puckett's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. At this time, the Medal of Honor flag will be presented by the Secretary of Defense. Thank you, Mr. Luck. Sergeant Major Thomas Payne, please join Secretary Austin, Secretary Wormuth, General Milley, and General Martin for the induction ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated during the presentations. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Sergeant First Class Thomas P. Payne, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Sergeant First Class Thomas P. Payne distinguished himself by conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty on October 22, 2015, during a daring nighttime hostage rescue in Kirkuk Province, Iraq, in support of Operation Inherent Resolve. Sergeant Payne led a combined assault team charged with clearing one of two buildings known to house the hostages. With speed, audacity, and courage, he led his team as they quickly cleared the assigned building, liberating 38 hostages. Upon hearing a request for additional assaulters to assist with clearing the other building, Sergeant Payne, on his own initiative, left his secured position, exposing himself to enemy fire as he bounded across the compound to the other building, from which entrenched enemy forces were engaging his comrades. Sergeant Payne climbed a ladder to the building's roof, which was partially engulfed in flames, and engaged enemy fighters below with grenades and small arms fire. He then moved back to the ground level to engage the enemy forces through a breach hole in the west side of the building. Knowing time was running out for the hostages trapped inside the burning building, Sergeant Payne moved to the main entrance where heavy enemy fire had thwarted previous attempts to enter. He knowingly risked his own life by bravely entering the building under intense enemy fire, enduring smoke, heat, and flames to identify the armored door imprisoning the hostages. Upon exiting, Sergeant Payne exchanged his rifle for bolt cutters and again entered the building, ignoring the enemy rounds impacting the walls around him as he cut the locks on the complex locking mechanism. His courageous actions, motivated by the coalition assault team members to enter the breach and assist with cutting the locks. After exiting to catch his breath, he re-entered the building to make the final lock cuts, freeing 37 hostages. Sergeant Payne then facilitated the evacuation of the hostages, even though ordered to evacuate the collapsing building himself, which was now structurally unsound due to the fire. Sergeant Payne then re-entered the burning building one last time to ensure everyone had been evacuated. He consciously exposed himself to enemy automatic gunfire each time he entered the building. His extraordinary heroism and selfless actions were key to liberating 75 hostages during a contested rescue mission that resulted in 20 enemies killed in action. Sergeant First Class Payne's gallantry under fire and uncommon valor are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, the United States Special Operations Command, and the United States Army. At this time, the Medal of Honor flag will be presented to the Secretary of Defense. Thank you, Sergeant Major Payne. Mrs. Valoria, Ms. Axon Shelsted, Specialist 5 Birdwell, Specialist 5 Fujii, Major Duffy, and Mr. Locke. Please join senior leaders and Sergeant Major Payne on the stage. The Medal of Honor plaque will now be unveiled in Induction Staff Sergeant Kaneshiro, Specialist 5 Birdwell, Specialist 5 Fujii, Major Duffy, Colonel Puckett, Jr., and Sergeant Major Payne into the Hall of Heroes. Thank you, Secretary Austin, Secretary Wormuth, General Milley, General Martin, Specialist 5 Birdwell, Specialist 5 Fujii, Major Duffy, Mr. Locke, and Sergeant Major Payne. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Ashley Axon Shelsted and Miss Naomi Valoria.
Good morning. My name is Naomi Villaria, here with my niece, Ashley Axon Shelstad, to represent the Kaneshiro family. Our father, Staff Sergeant Edward Noboru Kaneshiro, was born in Honolulu, Hawaii on July 22, 1928. He came from a large family, the eighth child of 16 siblings. After graduating from Leilehua High School in Wahiawa on the island of Oahu, he worked on the family farm for almost 10 years before joining the Army. While serving in the Army with the 1st Cavalry Division in Vietnam, he was killed in action on March 6, 1967. Our mother became a widow and a single mother at 35 years old. She began a life of tremendous difficulty raising 5 children alone. The oldest daughter was 10 and the youngest son at only 4 months old. Our mother never said a word about our father or the war all these years because the grief was just too profound. We were all very young when our father died. As years passed and stories were told, we knew that our father was a proud soldier who carried traits of duty, honor, and pride into war. On December 1, 1966, he was a squad leader of his platoon during a mission in Kim Son Valley, Vietnam, when his unit came under fire from a heavily fortified village of North Vietnamese troops. Without being told what to do by anyone, he crawled forward to attack it alone, using 6 grenades and an M16 rifle. His brave and selfless act not only saved the lives of U.S. soldiers, but also resulted in success for the next mission of the Army forces. Sadly, just 3 months later, he was killed by enemy fire. As we grew up, we were able to read and learn about our father through conversations with relatives and reading newspaper articles. We realized how heroic his actions were when we learned that he was recommended for the Medal of Honor. We were all well aware that this was the highest honor the country could bestow on a serviceman. My youngest brother, John, helped add to that perspective. He followed in our dad's footsteps as an American soldier, and we were very proud. John accepted the Medal of Honor from President Joe Biden yesterday on behalf of the Kaneshiro family. John joined ROTC during high school and joined the U.S. Army upon graduating. He continued his service as an Army reservist and completed 2 deployments to the Middle East during Operation Iraqi Freedom. He carried on the legacy of Army service. From what we remember from our childhood, we recall our dad being a very quiet and humble man. We believe he would not want attention directed at him because we presume he thought all he did on the battlefield was his duty. We believe our dad would have been honored to receive the Medal of Honor, but would not want all the fuss. This week has shed new light above his bravery. Though my mother never spoke of the war, my father's military service, she too would have been so proud. Our mother passed away this year on April 10th at the age of 90, and will rest in peace with our dad at the Punch Bowl National Cemetery of the Pacific in his home state of Hawaii on July 22nd, which happens to be his birthday. Our family is extremely honored and overwhelmed with gratitude that our father's heroic actions to save his fellow soldiers and his duty to country has finally been recognized with this very prestigious award of the Medal of Honor and to be inducted into the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes. For our future generations, my niece Ashley has a few words to tell her grandpa.
If my grandfather were here today, I would tell him, I'm so proud to be your granddaughter. I'm proud of your service and your bravery. I gave my son a middle name, Noboru, in your honor. His name is Sebastian Noboru Axon, and we will teach him our family traits you took into battles: duty, honor, and pride. And I will be so proud if my child decides to join the Army. I am so proud that you and Uncle John were soldiers, and I am proud of the American soldier. And to all the soldiers who served with my grandpa, thank you. And for all those who served and are still serving, thank you. Our family is grateful and extremely proud that my grandfather, Staff Sergeant Edward Noboru Kaneshiro, is being inducted into the Hall of Heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Ashley Axon-Shelsted and Miss Naomi Valoria. Ladies and gentlemen, Specialist 5 Birdwell.
This may be a bit painful for me, and if I don't keep it short, it's going to be painful for you. But I want to thank my Creator. I want to thank President Biden, the United States Army, General Otis, who was my commander that day and never stopped supporting this effort, which resulted in the Medal of Honor. Also, thanks to my family and the Cherokee Nation, and for the men who were there and the men who didn't make it, this award is for you. And by this award, the world will now know that we accomplished something very important that day. We saved Tonsanute Air Base from the enemy. Thank you.
Thank you, Specialist 5 Birdwell. Ladies and gentlemen, Major Duffy.
I prepared a poem, as I am a poet, and I wanted to tell my view of the story, which was more than 2 days. We were up on Charlie for almost 2 weeks. It's my retrospective on Charlie. I thought I would escape staff duty in Saigon. I volunteer for advisor duty with the Vietnamese Airborne. My associates describe me as foolish with the war winding down. Why get killed as we are pulling out? The Vietnamese can handle it. I disregard all their well-intentioned advice, as I am a soldier, and I have no desire to fight in a war zone from behind a desk. I put on my camouflage fatigues and my cocky red beret. Not too bad, if I say so myself. Now I am outfitted to join my paratroopers. I fight on Nui Badan, or translated Black Virgin Mountain. I fight in the Tainen Forest. Too many tunnels there. Next, I fight on Rocket Ridge in a place called Charlie. My team of 4 is short men. I am a team of 1. I air assault in with 470 paratroopers and come out with 37. We are surrounded by a division. Anti-aircraft guns ring Charlie. The landing zone is untenable, with 10 anti-aircraft guns above us. Helicopters resupply is precluded as the NVA controlled the airspace above us. NVA artillery fire blows up my bunker, with me still in it. I crawl out over the dead bodies, my head ringing from a concussion. My counterpart, the battalion commander, is killed. The XO, Major Lee May, assumes command of the battalion. NVA artillery fire blows up, start again, with 8 NVA battalions tasked to take Charlie base. Most on Charlie are wounded or killed in the battle. Medical evacuation is not possible for the wounded. Our orders or fight to the death. 2 weeks, the paratroopers fight even without ammunition. They fight with their bayonets and entrenching tools until it is get out or get killed in the next attack. Skedaddle, we choose. Lee May and myself becoming the rear guard. One battalion of NVA attacked on our western trench line. I request the gunship stop them, as we are short on ammo. Flying low, machine guns and grenades expending, rockets blasting. The Cobras stopped the NVA, leaving them dead and dying. Ordnance expended and low on fuel, the Cobras depart. Lee May and I hunker down, maintaining a low profile. 2 NVA battalions come out of the jungle in a follow-up attack. We had withdrawn. They take our western trench line. They are befuddled, as their first attack had failed. They search for paratroopers, but none are there. They organize search party to sweep Charlie. They send a company to search east, moving towards us. They spot us. Melee fires at them. They take cover. A little more cautious now. They know where we are. The NVA soon open up upon us. Melee is hit and down. He's back up, again firing at them. No way he can stop them. I'm on the radio. The Cobras are coming back, coming in above us. Get down, get down. The choppers are incoming with guns blazing. The Cobras are firing, hot shells, casing, dropping down upon us. The NVA sweep force is bloodied, smashed, and broken. Wounded, but still alive. We get up and run away from death. On the run, I contact the forward air controller in the sky. Request B-52 Arc-Light. Target 2 NVA battalions in the open on Charlie. We soon link up with our withdrawing paratroopers. The FAC advises the B-50 Arc-Light is diverted. 1 minute until bomb release. I roger the FAC and tell everyone to get down in defilade. Bombs released, 90 seconds until impact. Get down. We hold on to our steel pots, mouths open. We hug the earth. The whistling bombs of death are heard by all. Charlie explodes in fiery flashes, blasting and killing. The ground tremors, leaves and debris fall down. No one could survive. Black smoke bellows high into the sky. The victorious NVA battalions on Charlie are destroyed. 2 weeks in battle have ravaged their formations. Thus, this final victory will be a difficult one to celebrate as black smoke arises from their NVA funeral pyre. We are recovering from the shock and the blast. Melee is coughing up blood as the doc works on him. He tells me, take command of the battalion. You saved the men. I am now the commander. I order a night march through the pitch black jungle. My paratroopers follow me. No one can see in the dark. The night explodes with bright flashes, artillery and packs. It is friendly fire, some fool's error. I check fire. We lose 3 killed and 7 wounded. I am furious. The night march continues until dawn arrives. We stop, now out of the jungle by the Poco River. Melee bandages fit to command. I brief him. No helicopters are available. Brigade orders us to walk out. The orders are given and we make ready to march. Incoming, incoming! The blast rockets impacting. Mortar rounds drop amongst us. The wounded cry out. The NVA spring an ambush. Troopers panic and scatter. I reach for my radio. It is hit by a bullet and destroyed. The command group is intact, plus 30 men. I grab my Car 15. I cock it. Follow me. Melee gathers the command group and as many as he can. Melee covers me. I move rapidly away from the kill zone. 1 kilometer distance, I find a clearing and a landing zone. Melee sets up the perimeter and redistributes ammunition. I'm on my small survival radio trying to raise a forward air controller. Covey 5-5 comes in. I request a 4-ship lift package for our group of 37, some wounded. Covey, we try to rustle up an extraction package. The NVA follow our breakout trail through the jungle. We see them approaching in a stream bed. I request immediate A1E or Cobra gunship support. We hunker down with too little ammo to engage. A pair of Sandy A1Es come up on my radio. I target the enemy unit that is tracking us. I request that the Sandys destroy the NVA. In 2 passes, guns and bombs eliminate the threat. More NVA keep popping up in different locations. I direct fire. 2 more flights of A1Es onto the enemy. Waiting for our lift package, I engage with Cobras. The NVA are setting up on the jungle's edge, also waiting. Huey Lead comes up on my radio. Dusty Cyanide, we are directed to have you depart on the first ship. I advise, I will be on the last ship, last man out on number 4. Roger, Dusty, you will be on the last ship out, acknowledged. Our 37 are formed into 4 sticks. The first lift is in, wounded, loaded, troopers boarding, lifting off an NVA machine gunner, opens up on them. The Cobras with the lift package attack and destroy the gun. Lift 2 comes in. The paratroopers scramble aboard. He is out. Lift 3 in and out without taking fire. We are the last 5. Lift 4 approaches. He is taking fire. He aborts and approaches from a new direction. He comes in low. Touchdown. We scramble onto the aircraft. I'm the tail gunner. I ride the strut and signal thumbs up. Ping, 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 ping. The chopper is riddled by gunfire. Captain High, hit in the leg, falls out of the helicopter. On the strut, I grab his webbing and fling him back inside. Melee helps me pull him in and starts treating his wound. The crew chief is shot out, twisting in the wind, his tether holding him in trail behind the aircraft. I pull him inside and find the entry wound in his chest. I quick patch his wound and I look for the exit wound. It is big and it is bubbling. I start to treat him. The bubbles stop. Mouth to mouth does not help to revive him. He is KIA. The helicopter flies to the medical station. We touch down, drop off our wounded and dead. We fly back to brigade headquarters to report. They are amazed that we are still alive. Ended that retrospective from my viewpoint. And I will conclude with a much shorter thought on this, and it's called Victory or Death. Nullus victor in Latin. The battle for Firebase Charlie was consuming. It killed those who tried to take the base. Battalions of NVA vanished in the maelstrom. The paratroopers holding Charlie suffered horrifically. It was a brutal battle, no quarter asked, none given. You killed the enemy, or the enemy killed you. It was simple formula, and it cost lives. Both sides offered up valor and courage. But in reality, it was a fight for survival. We all wanted to live, to see our families again. In war, there is only one winner and one loser. No one won on Charlie. Each side managed to lose. This is the dilemma in a battle of fight to the death, when each side forges ahead without regard to losses. The butcher's bill is atrociously high and sobering. Each side weeps for its losses and mourns the fallen. Thank you.
Thank you, Major Duffy. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Locke.
Good morning to our distinguished guests, and especially to Colonel Ralph Puckett's fellow Medal of Honor recipients and their families. He is honored to be considered one of you. While Colonel Puckett is unable to attend today, both he and his wife Jeannie are here in spirit. In their stead, I am privileged to have been asked to speak on his behalf. As their honored representative, they requested just one thing of me: fewer words have more impact. Given that Commander's guidance, I've opted for what I'll call Contingency Plan 3B. Be specific, be brief, and be gone. Somewhat easier said than done, as I'm sure you'll soon appreciate. Colonel Puckett graduated from the United States Military Academy in 1949 as an infantry officer. With the outbreak of war in Korea the following year, he immediately volunteered to serve in the first major conflict of the Cold War. Recognized for his character to lead and passion to serve, Lieutenant Puckett was selected to organize, train, and command the newly created 8th Army Ranger Company. Within 6 weeks, this elite Ranger Company was riding into combat on the decks of Sherman tanks as part of the 25th Infantry Division spearheaded into North Korea, an advance which eventually brought the Rangers to a barren ridgeline 60 miles from the Chinese border. Colonel Puckett's actions that night of 24-25 November 1950 during the Battle of Hill 205 are highlighted and documented in his Medal of Honor citation and thus need not to be recounted here. However, for those who know Colonel Puckett, there is nothing about his courage on Hill 205 that surprises us. His actions were simply, as one Ranger succinctly put it, Ralph being Ralph. While Colonel Puckett suffered grievous wounds during that fight for the Hill 205 and endured long recovery, the battle only proved to be the start of an exceptional career. As President Biden remarked during the May 2021 Medal of Honor ceremony, quote, "Now I'd be remiss if I didn't note that Ralph Puckett's service to our nation did not end in the Korean War. It did not end after his service in the Vietnam War. It did not end after his retirement from active duty," unquote. During Vietnam, Colonel Puckett would once again volunteer in 1967 for a tour of combat as a battalion commander in the 101st Airborne Division, where he earned the moniker the Ranger. It was a description exemplified on many an occasion, such as during one dire night-long firefight when a hard-pressed infantry platoon leader preparing for a defensive last stand recalled the effect on his battle-exhausted men. Quote, "Word of Colonel Puckett's arrival spread like wildfire. We all stiffened up and felt that nothing bad could happen now because a Ranger was with us," unquote. Sharing the danger and hardships with his men epitomizes Ralph Puckett's warrior ethos of combat leadership. All told, by the time the Ranger retired in 1971, after 22 years of active duty service, his ribbon rack would reflect, among other awards, the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 3 Legions of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars with V device for valor, 5 Purple Hearts, and 10 Air Medals. In addition, he has the Combat Infantryman's Badge with Star, the Special Forces tab, the Ranger tab, Master Parachutist Wings, and Columbium Lancero Ranger Badge. Though he himself would never say so, the case be made that he is the most decorated soldier for valor in U.S. Army history. Retirement from active duty did not signal an end to service, though. For the next 20 years, the Ranger continued to focus on the leadership and teamwork development of youth until 1990, when the Pucketts returned home to Columbus Fort Benning, Georgia. There, the colonel became a prominent speaker and instructor regarding all topics infantry and leadership related. In 1992, he was an inaugural inductee into the U.S. Army Ranger Hall of Fame. From 1996 to 2008, he served as the honorary colonel of the 75th Ranger Regiment an unprecedented and unequal 12-year period under 7 consecutive regimental commanding officers, a period of time that included trips to both Iraq and Afghanistan, where his Rangers helped him celebrate his 80th birthday. Honors continued to follow the colonel to include selection as a 2004 Distinguished Graduate of West Point and a 2007 recipient of the Infantry's Doughboy Award. Such honors, though, were only a byproduct of leadership philosophy that also embraced social change within the Army. As a leader, Colonel Puckett was all-inclusive. Though President Truman had only recently desegregated the Army in 1948, Lieutenant Puckett selected 2 African Americans to serve with the 8th Army Ranger Company in 1950. To quote the colonel later, "We were all Americans. Our blood was the same color, red." Later in 2015, when women were authorized to attend the U.S. Army Ranger School, Colonel Puckett was one of the first to proclaim, if they meet the standards, they are Rangers. For decades, Colonel Puckett has mentored and counseled soldiers at all levels, from senior officers and non-commissioned officers to junior enlisted. General Sam McChrystal captured the essence of this by stating, quote, "If we measure Ralph Puckett's accomplishments and we only include the Medal of Honor, we are almost missing the point. Ralph Puckett's awards are thousands of young Rangers, many of whom were still fairly young, that he's touched by his example and his actions. That's the real monument to him," unquote. While I have my own personal Colonel Puckett stories over 30 years, when I reflect on who the Colonel is and what he represents, it is not of the White House ceremony, with the President of the United States placing the Medal of Honor around his neck, or the dozens of senior officers and NCOs whom the Colonel has so positively influenced over his decades of service in and out of uniform. It is not the overwhelming number of ribbons, badges, and patches on his uniform, or the awards and accolades conveyed to him by others. In reality, it is a singular picture taken the day prior to the White House ceremony, at a private lunch held in the Colonel's honor at the Pentagon. Though being honored by the Secretary, Chief of Staff, Sergeant Major of the Army, what did this picture capture? It captured the then 94-year-old Colonel in the corner of the room, speaking one-on-one with a young waiter. Those of us who know the Colonel well know that given the choice between a general or a private to talk to mentor, the Ranger will always seek out the private first. The Colonel's philosophy of leadership, his moral compass, is predicated on a cadet prayer that West Point graduates espouse. Less a religious invocation and more a code to live by, both professionally and personally. An extract reads, "Make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won." In the end, it was never about medals, awards, praise, or recognition. It was not about rank, position, or prestige. It was, and it always is, about the harder right instead of the easier wrong, about his Rangers and his soldiers. Colonel Ralph Puckett does not set the example, he lives the example. He has a legacy that may be equaled by few, but surpassed by none. On behalf of Colonel Puckett, his family, and his 8th Army Ranger Company comrades in arms, I thank you for your time. Stay safe. Rangers lead the way.
Thank you, Mr. Locke. Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Major Payne.
To the President of the United States of America, the Department of Defense Chain of Command, and my fellow Americans, thank you. This is truly an honor. The Fujii hostage rescue raid on October 22, 2015 highlights our country's undying commitment to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Men of the United States Special Operations Command risked their lives, and Master Sergeant Josh Wheeler gave his life in order to liberate the oppressed, so that the liberated now have the second chance at life and the pursuit of happiness. Anytime our boots hit the ground, we are ambassadors of the American way of life. As soon as we infill behind enemy lines on the Fujii hostage rescue, we were in an intense firefight. Our courage partners were engaged in perfect interlocking sectors of fire. Master Sergeant Wheeler knew it had to be done, and he did not hesitate. He looked back at another assaulter and gave the command, "On me." On me is a command that fearless leaders give to lead, motivate, and inspire on the field of battle. Josh gave the command, "On me," and those were his last words, as he led the way, running toward the sound of the guns. Josh's actions set the standard and it was our duty to liberate the oppressed and complete the mission. Other assaulters held down the breach point, all the way down to their last magazine, while bullets were ripping through their uniform. I witnessed assaulters fearlessly fight on a rooftop of a burning building while engaging ISIS combatants as the enemy initiated multiple suicide vests right underneath our feet. Other assaulters began breaching the prison windows, while a sustained rate of enemy machine gun fire poured out of the burning building. My teammates, the heroes of the Fujii hostage rescue's actions, are the epitome of selfless service. Their legacy, along with the legacy of the 9/11 generation, will live on with this Medal of Honor. And the spirit of the Medal of Honor lives inside every great American. To the next generation of great American warriors, keep your aim true, stay vigilant, and be prepared to push our Army to new limits. We look forward to gracing the field of battle and destroying the enemy with you. Thank you. I look forward to serving our great country as the Medal of Honor Guardian. Rangers lead the way, and from the words of Master Sergeant Josh Wheeler, on me.
Thank you, Sergeant Major Payne. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and join in the singing of the Army Song. The words to the Army Song can be found in your program.
March along with the army of the free. Count the brave, count the true, who have fought to victory. We're the army and proud of our name. We're the army and proudly proclaim. First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. Then it's hi, hi, hey, the army's on its way. Count off the cadence out and strong. For where'er we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along.
This concludes the Medal of Honor induction ceremony. Thank you for attending. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain at your seats until the official party has departed Conley Hall. Thank you.